This is Dell EMC Networking Tech Talk with OpenManage Network Manager. We're going to talk about OMNM 6.5 and we're going to focus on configuration management. This is for backup, restore, and deploy of configuration files. In OMNM 6.5, we have this configuration management tab right in the middle here. And this page, in contrast to Service Pack 3, was set up to help you focus specifically on just configuration management. And so what we have on this page is a Manage Resources tab. It's the same as the Manage Resources tab on the Resource Manager, but it allows you to basically see the devices that you have in inventory, but we have a few additional columns here, and you'll notice last backup, next deploy. So it's a little more focused view for Managed Resources. On the right here, you see configuration files, and if I click on one of these, you'll notice that it populates the configuration files, and so it's basically showing you context for that particular device, the configuration files associated with it. If I go to a box that has multiple, obviously you'll see multiple configuration files loaded. Down below, we have alarms, and these are alarms specifically filtered for configuration management event. So what you're going to see here are things like configuration issues. Here you see configuration deploy failure. You'll see backup failure. Anything related to configuration-related actions will show up here in terms of internal events. So things that we know are configuration-type tasks. And so that's what you'll see here. You're not going to see things like link up, link down. That's not really a configuration-related task. It is an alarm you'll see in the normal alarm window, but again, we're just showing you configuration-related events or alarms here. Below here, we have the configuration management schedules, and this is a focused view of just the scheduled items related to configuration options. You'll see scheduled backups. Right-click here, and you'll see that all you can do on this schedule is schedule a file backup, a file restore, or a deploy type of action. So again, it's just focused on configuration schedules. Now, if you want to see that this is all a subset of the main schedule, which is if you go to the Settings tab under Schedules, you'll see all schedules, including these. But again, these are filtered for specific configuration-related schedules. You'll see here image repository, and this is where you're going to be importing images for you that are ready for your deployment. And then at the bottom here, you'll see file servers. And these are the file servers that you set up to allow the copy to back up or restore, or whatever that may be, or deploy. And so this is the file server that the device is going to use when it goes to retrieve a file or to put a file so that OMNM can pull it in or push it out. So let's dive in a little deeper here. On your configuration files, some very nice tools here are, once you see your configurations, you have the ability to multi-select and compare two configurations. So I can just basically select those and just do compare selected. And it's going to highlight just the specific differences between those two files. Now you can also expand this view here, just like any other portlet. Once you expand, you're going to lose your context sensitivity, and it's just going to show all your devices. And here you also have the capability to sort on equipment, and if you want to do specific versioning comparisons, you can basically filter for specific devices using the Advanced tab here to filter on what you want. Otherwise, you're just going to see everything that's on this screen, which is everything in your inventory. But if I were to sort by equipment, I'll see here if I have multiple here, I have like 106, I have 2 here, I can also select those and compare, just like we did on the other page. You're not confined to just the same device. You can pick one device. If you think it's the same model and you want to see compare configs, I can compare this X1052P on this 100 IP to 101 to see if there are any differences. I'm not sure if I have any here. I have a few, it looks like. And you can compare that way as well. So kind of a nice feature there. Right off of the Manage Resources tab, you can do this on the main one too. You can right-click a device, you can go to File Management, and you can view the latest config, and it'll just bring up a dialog with that config on it. Oh, I didn't back that one up yet. That's what's good about these columns here. You can see which ones are backed up. So let's look at that. This one is backed up. File Management, view the latest. And it's going to just show me what's in the inventory. So I can scroll through that if I want to. You can either back up or restore it right here if you want to, from these buttons at the bottom. you can do what we just did was to compare, it'll automatically compare the current configuration to the last previous one. You can do it to manual backup here, a manual restore, or you can actually do a deploy, or you can actually import a configuration file for this device and save it in inventory and then later push it out. And one thing to note here is you also have a group capability. If you want to multi-select many devices, you just simply hold down the control key, the shift key. Control key will do multi-select, but individual, like you see here. If I want to do things that aren't necessary together, I can just right-click that and do file management backup. And what's going to do is it's going to give me a dialog here where I can still add more equipment here or add groups if I want to augment this, but it's showing me what's going to get backed up here. And then I have various options here to do running config or startup config, but I could just execute here or add it to a schedule, and it would automatically add to our schedule items and automatically back those up at certain intervals. Some interesting things to note here are, I did mention, maybe I didn't mention labels, but you can create labels. And so if you want to have like a gold config, basically a representation of your configuration files or your device's config when it's in a good state, you could create that kind of label, and then you can save to that label later, or even if you have an issue where you want to restore to the gold label or some label, you can push out to a label. And so this is your ability to set to an existing label or create a new label here. So you just type it in, and it would become labeled across all those devices, and so you could see them all. You can see devices across all of the same labels. Now, if you want to back these up and also add an email address, you can do a comparison at that time when it gets backed up. It will go compare against the label from current or whatever label you want in here. And you can have it emailed if there's changes detected. That's kind of a nice feature because then you'll know, hey, something in this configuration file changed when I last backed it up. And so you have some other options here for email, but you simply add the email here, and that will automatically do that on that schedule or even on demand if you want. Again, to do it in contiguous groups, you can just basically hold down the shift key and it will select the whole range for you to do. Now, another way to do a group backup, which we'll cover more later when we get to group operations, but if you go to groups and locations, if you've defined a group as static or dynamic, you can basically select that group. Maybe it's all of your Power Connect group, right click and just do a backup from here, file management, backup, restore, deploy from here as well. Okay, image repository. Well, let's see if there's anything, before I do that, if there's anything here that I missed in terms of file management. I think we pretty much covered all those items there. On the deploy side, we've pre-seeded some firmware for Power Connect devices. At some point, you may want to pull in new devices, but let's first talk about ones that you have. If you want to deploy, obviously, as I showed you, you can do it from here. You can do a file management deploy, and it's going to bring up a list of firmwares that you can use to deploy, excuse me, for that box or related boxes. You just simply select it. You can add multiple equipment here, not just this one. You can add groups again or specific equipment that you want to add to this deployment. But one thing to note here is you have the status, and if it's appropriate for this box, you'll see the status turn green. If it's not appropriate, it's not going to turn green for you. So that's what this status is for. And so I don't know if I have any X series on here, but this is a 1008. 100, let's just try one here. So you see it turns green. And so if you don't get this green status, it's basically telling you it's not going to work. And so this helps you kind of refine that. And so if you could do multiple maybe for different pieces of equipment, and as long as each one has a green status, then you should be good. Again, you can add, schedule, execute from there, but you can also do this from the image repository. Rather than go from device and then select a firmware, you can select a firmware and then select a device. So I can select the firmware here and say deploy, and then select here the equipment that I want to deploy to. And so it's the same kind of thing where I would select the appropriate firmware. If I have an N1 in my inventory, let's see if I have some here that might be, can do add selection done. You'll see here one is okay, one is not. And so this is basically saying that I picked a device here, but it's not an N11XX firmware, so it's not turning green here. So kind of a little bit of validation for you. Again, you have up here at the top options to do different protocols. I would suggest you leave the default, but that's one way to deploy from the image repository portlet. If you need to bring in new images, you can either go new, and if you have it on your current disk, you can say a firmware image, and it's the same process where you put in whatever your name is here, if it's Power Connect or whatever it is, some description, some version on here, and then pick the relative device that it applies to, and basically then what you're going to do is give it a device family. What kind of device family does this go to? And then you're just going to go to your image and pick it. And so you can select your files from your disk, local disk, or you can import from URL. If it's on a website somewhere, you can import it directly from here. So it just depends on where you want to get it. You can obviously edit these as well if you want to change various aspects about the ones that are in inventory. But there's another option here for downloading firmware from DNOS or FTOS. Now what this is going to do, it'll save you the step of trying to find the firmware, but what all it's going to do is download this to your local drive. You're still going to then need to then go to say new firmware and then import it from your local drive. And so I'll show you what this does here. This just goes to the Dell site. For DNOS, it'll allow you to go in and select a specific, specific model and do the driver download here. But again, it's just going to be the normal download process versus it doesn't do a direct kind of download. And for the FTOS, it's going to ask you to log in so that you can get the firmware, download it locally, and then you still have to run through that step of going to the new firmware image. You can also pull in configuration images here. But it's a little bit redundant since you can also do that on the configuration files portlet by importing new images. Okay, and moving down to the file servers again, this is a Linux box. We do have an external file server configured, and so you can add new ones here. This was probably set up already on your getting started page, but you basically can have any number of file servers to support you. Just call it, give it a new name and whatever the IP address, login, and password are, and you can bring those in. The main thing here is your FTP. Is it FTP capable, TFTP, and then have an SCP? You should have a combination of the two, at least. But you can have multiple, and generally it'll find the first one that works. It'll try each file server until it finds one that works or that fits the appropriate protocol. Okay, that's configuration files in a quick few minutes here, and we will have more advanced sessions to talk about some more advanced topics related to this area in further sessions. All right, thank you for watching, and we will see you the next time on the next session.